The world, in its current iteration, is a cacophony of relentless motion. It is a vast, mechanical clockwork where the gears grind against the human spirit, demanding performance, attention, and an exhausting adherence to expectations that were never truly one's own. For the individual navigating this landscape, life often feels like a series of fragmented encounters, a frantic scramble to keep pace with the ticking seconds of a digital age. There is a specific, quiet agony in this, the sensation of being surrounded by billions, yet existing in a vacuum of profound isolation. Imagine, for a moment, the atmosphere of an ordinary Tuesday evening. The sky outside is a bruised purple, fading into the charcoal of oncoming night. Inside the home of a person struggling under the weight of existence, the air is thick with the static of unfulfilled longings. The house is silent, yet the silence is not peaceful. It is heavy, pressurized, and filled with the ghosts of what if and if only. Here lies the paradox. The person is physically present, surrounded by the objects they have spent years accumulating, yet they are spiritually absent. They look into the mirror and see a face that has weathered the storms of decades. But they do not see the soul behind the eyes. They have become a ghost in their own living room. The weight they carry is not merely financial, though that shadow looms in the corner. It is not merely the ache of loneliness, though that resonance hums in the floorboards. It is the crushing realization that they have spent their most vibrant years acting out a script written by consensus, by fear, and by the crushing, invisible gravity of other people's judgments. This is the pattern interruption. The realization that the exhaustion one feels is not a failure of character, but a natural response to living in a state of deep, fundamental misalignment. The world tells the seeker to strive harder, to run faster, to add more layers of armor, but the truth is the inverse. The power is not found in the acquisition of more information, but in the radical, terrifying, and beautiful act of remembering who one was before the world told them who to be. Why then does the human spirit so readily accept the yoke of external expectation? And how does one go about deconstructing a life built upon the shifting sands of consensus reality? To understand this, one must look at the psychological architecture of the self. From early childhood, the developing mind acts as a sponge, absorbing the frequencies of the environment. If the environment is one of scarcity, anxiety, or rigid judgment, the individual creates a false self, a construct designed to survive, to please, and to minimize risk. This false self is not a mistake, it is a survival mechanism. However, as the decades pass, the survival mechanism hardens into a cage. The why of our persistent dissatisfaction lies here. We have mistaken the cage for the home. We have conflated the survival strategy with our own eternal identity. The how of our liberation requires what may be termed recursive truth-seeking. It is the process of diving beneath the layers of accumulated fear and asking, is this thought truly mine? Most individuals navigate life using the borrowed mind, a collection of aphorisms, fears, and cultural mandates inherited from parents, teachers, and a media landscape that thrives on the human sense of lack. When one begins to deconstruct this, they encounter the void of disorientation. This is the period of existential vertigo one feels when they realize that the path they have been treading is not their own. Philosophically, this is the transition from object being to subject being. An object is moved by external forces. It reacts. A subject is the origin point of its own reality. It creates. To move into the role of the subject requires the abandonment of the search for more. We are trained to believe that we are incomplete, that some future event, a promotion, a relationship, a financial windfall will finally make us whole. This is the greatest deception of the modern age. The soul is not a vessel to be filled. It is a fountain already in operation. The work, therefore, is not to go out and capture truth, but to stop the relentless output of falsehoods that keep the true self buried. Consider the tale of Theodosius, a man who lived in a kingdom of mirrors. Theodosius was a master craftsman, renowned for his ability to repair the tarnished frames of the aristocracy. He spent his days obsessing over the glass, polishing the surfaces so that every visitor who entered his workshop would see themselves reflected with absolute, unflattering clarity. One day, Theodosius found an ancient dust-covered mirror hidden behind a stack of velvet drapes in the deepest corner of his shop. Unlike the others, this mirror did not show the face of the one standing before it. Instead, it glowed with a soft, steady light from within. When Theodosius looked into it, he did not see his worn hands or his gray-streaked beard. He saw a vast, starlit expanse that felt like home, a place of infinite possibility where he was not a craftsman repairing the vanity of others, but a king overseeing a domain of his own design. Confused and frightened, Theodosius covered the mirror back up. He returned to his work, but the light of the hidden mirror had changed the way he saw everything. The faces of the aristocrats seemed like masks. Their worries about status and wealth appeared to him as trivial, fading ghosts. He realized that for years he had been a slave to the reflection of others, believing that his worth was tethered to how well he could polish their glass. He had forgotten that the mirrors were his to move, his to break, or his to discard. Theodosius spent the next year in a state of silent, inward rebellion. He stopped accepting orders. He began to sell his tools. He was preparing to live within the light of the hidden mirror. When the townspeople came to mock him for his lost mind, Theodosius merely smiled. He knew what they did not. They were trapped in the reflection, while he was finally standing in the reality. He was no longer the servant of the glass. He had become the master of the light. The transition from Theodosius the craftsman to Theodosius the master is the journey currently awaiting the reader. To integrate this truth is to acknowledge that the weight of the world you feel is the weight of the mirrors you have been polishing for others. Begin today by recognizing that the outside world is merely a feedback loop of your own internal declarations. You are not a victim of the economy, of your age, or of your history. You are the architect of the temple. If you have felt the heavy, quiet call of your own soul, the realization that you were meant for more than the maintenance of a false identity, hit the like button. It is a small signal, but it tells the universe that you are ready to stop polishing the glass and start living in the light. To anchor this, you must cultivate the sacred appointment. For the next hour, and indeed for the remainder of this journey, you are instructed to clear your space. Remove the distractions that feed the borrowed mind. Set aside the phone, close the extra browser tabs, and sit in a chair where your feet touch the floor. Feel the ground. You do not have to hold yourself together. The earth, in its profound and ancient indifference to your struggles, will hold you regardless of whether you are perfect or worthy. You are supported. You are present. Subscribe to this series to ensure you do not miss a single chapter of this restoration. We are building a collective resonance, and your presence is a necessary part of the pattern. We have begun the act of stripping away the layers. We have identified that the master of the house has been sleeping while the servant ran amok, creating chaos in the name of safety. But what happens when the master wakes up? What happens when the servant is given a clear, direct, and divine command? In our next chapter, we shall descend into the kitchen of creation to learn why your words are not just descriptions of your life, but the blueprints for your future. The servant is listening. Are you prepared to speak? Picture, if you will, the grand, cavernous kitchen of a celestial manor. The architecture is vaulted, ancient, and vast, lit by the flicker of torches that have burned since the dawn of time. In the center of this hall stands a figure of immense, unassuming strength, the servant. This entity is neither malevolent nor benevolent. It is purely functional, a force of nature as neutral as gravity or the rising tide. It moves with a terrifying, rhythmic precision, its eyes perpetually fixed upon the master, waiting for the slightest inflection, the smallest sigh, the most casual whisper. The master, meanwhile, wanders through the house, oblivious to the fact that the servant is currently executing orders based on instructions given years ago. The master stands in the grand hallway, shivering from a draft, and mutters, "It is always cold in this house. The warmth never reaches me." Instantly, the servant, standing in the shadows of the doorway, bows deeply. Yes, master, it murmurs, and begins to adjust the architectural vents to ensure that the chill remains, that the fires stay dim, and that the drafts persist. The paradox of our existence is this. We live in a house we have filled with monsters of our own design, all while believing we are merely victims of the architecture. We vent our frustrations to the air, not realizing the air is a recording device. We whisper our limitations to our reflection, not realizing the reflection is the foreman of our reality. The servant does not ask for clarification. It does not pause to wonder if the master truly desires to be impoverished, lonely, or stagnant. It only knows that the master has spoken, and in the kingdom of the spirit, a spoken word is a decree. The moment you complain, you are giving an order. The moment you doubt, you are providing a blueprint. The servant is already at work. To truly grasp the mechanics of the servant, what many call the subconscious mind, one must engage in a rigorous process of recursive deconstruction. Why does this part of the human psyche function with such blind mechanical obedience? And how does it come to hold so much authority over our lived experience? The why is rooted in the evolutionary necessity of efficiency. The human brain is a pattern-matching engine designed for survival. To function in a complex world, it must automate the vast majority of our reality. If you had to consciously direct every heartbeat, every cell repair, and every emotional reaction, you would collapse under the cognitive load within minutes. Thus, the subconscious evolved to be the ultimate administrator. It takes the instructions it receives from your dominant thought patterns and codifies them into the laws of your life. It is not designed to reason, it is designed to execute. The how of its operation is the key to our transformation. The subconscious does not distinguish between a fact and a feeling. It perceives both as data. When you observe your bank account and say, "I am broke," the subconscious doesn't check the ledger to see if you are merely having a temporary shortfall. It registers the declarative "I am" and begins to synthesize a reality that confirms that identity. It begins to pull your focus away from opportunities, it dampens your creative initiative, and it creates a psychological field of scarcity. This brings us to the deeper philosophical inquiry. What is the nature of the word? Throughout the ages, mystical traditions have posited that the universe was spoken into existence. Your life is no different. The subconscious operates on the principle of linguistic causation. It believes that if you are stating it, you are intending it. It is the perfect, literalist executor of your inner narrative. If you approach this with a dismissive or ironic tone, the servant is indifferent. It does not care about the nuance of your tone, it cares about the repetition of the command. If we ask, "Why do we continue to give orders that hurt us?" the answer lies in the comfort of consistency. The mind prefers a painful known over a prosperous unknown. To change the command is to risk the stability of the current reality, and the servant, in its quest for efficiency, will fight to keep the status quo. It will whisper, "Don't say that. You know you aren't actually wealthy." It will sabotage your new affirmations with "yes, but." This is the final layer of the deconstruction, realizing that the resistance you feel is not the universe saying no, but the servant saying, "I am simply continuing the work you assigned me yesterday." Consider the case of Julian, an architect of singular talent who lived in the bustling metropolis of Ethelgard. Julian was a man who could draw a spire that touched the clouds and a foundation that could withstand the fiercest tremor. He was, in his professional life, the master of blueprints. Yet, in his personal life, Julian was a man of constant, casual lamentation. Every morning, as he walked to his drafting table, Julian would sigh at the sight of the sunrise and mutter, "Another day of struggle. The projects are drying up, and the people of this city have no taste for true beauty." He would tell his assistants, "I always get the clients who don't pay. It is the curse of my trade." He believed he was simply being realistic, a habit he had picked up from a mentor years ago who liked to complain about the economy. Julian did not know that his subconscious was a master builder, far more potent than his own hand. For 10 years, Julian's servant diligently gathered the materials of his words. Because Julian declared that projects were drying up, the servant quietly redirected the flow of potential clients toward his competitors, ensuring that Julian's office remained, as requested, empty. Because he declared that he always received clients who didn't pay, the servant fine-tuned the selection process, gently pushing away the honorable patrons and pulling toward him those who were prone to financial instability. The tragedy reached its zenith on a Tuesday, much like this one. Julian stood before a council of elders to present his magnum opus, a design for a library that would have preserved the knowledge of the ages. He had spent months on it, yet, as he reached into his satchel to pull out the plans, he found only blank, yellowed parchment. He had somehow packed the wrong folder, an oversight he had never made in his life. The council, sensing a lack of readiness, dismissed him instantly. Julian left the hall, his heart a ruin, and muttered the words that sealed his fate. "I knew it. I am always the one who loses everything at the final moment." That evening, he sat in his home, alone, and the servant finished its work. It had built the life he had ordered, brick by brick, sigh by sigh. Julian had been the architect of his own destruction, all because he treated his words as casual venting, never realizing they were, in fact, the only blueprints the servant was allowed to follow. The story of Julian is the story of every individual who treats their inner dialogue as a disposable commodity. Your words are not vapor, they are the architectural plans of your future. The servant is not a judge, it is a labor force. It does not decide if your plans are good. It decides if they are loud enough, consistent enough, and emotionally charged enough to be built. To integrate this truth, you must move from a state of unconscious venting to conscious decreeing. You must become the guardian of your own speech. This does not mean you must be perfect, but it does mean you must be awake. When you hear yourself say, "I am always tired," you must pause. You must recognize that you have just handed the builder a blueprint for fatigue. You must revoke the order, stop, correct yourself. That was the old story. My body is, in fact, a vessel of inexhaustible energy. This is not a trick, it is a realignment. You are retuning the frequency of the broadcast. You are telling the servant, "I am rescinding the previous order, and I am issuing a new one." If you have caught yourself today, if you have realized that your own words have been the primary obstacle to your joy, take a moment to press like. Let this be a public acknowledgement that the era of accidental creation has come to an end. You are now aware of the servant. You have looked into the grand kitchen of your own mind and seen the builder waiting for your word. You have seen how even the most brilliant of us can be undone by the casual, repetitive whispers of defeat. But the power to draft the new blueprint is now firmly in your hands. We have established that the servant obeys the decree of I am. But what is the nature of this I am? Why is it that, when we speak those two words, the very fabric of the universe seems to shift in response? How does the I am act as the trigger for the entire mechanic? We move now to the mystery of identity. We move to the burning bush of your own soul. In our next chapter, we shall explore why the phrases "I am old," "I am broke," or "I am invisible" are not just words, but are, in fact, acts of supreme, albeit destructive creation. We will learn how to reclaim the name of creation, and in doing so, force the world to see you for who you truly are, rather than who you have been told to be. The servant is waiting for your next command. Are you ready to reclaim your throne? Imagine a vast, arid desert under a sky so clear it feels like a dome of polished sapphire. In the center of this expanse stands a singular, ancient burning bush, not one consumed by flames, but one that radiates a cool, luminescent light. It is a paradox of nature, an entity that burns with the intensity of existence yet remains untouched by the ravages of time. Now, visualize the individual standing before this bush. In their hand, they hold a quill dipped in the ink of their own history. They have been tasked with naming themselves. But look closely at what they write upon the sands. They do not write divinity, they do not write infinite potential or unfolding grace. Instead, they write, "I am tired." They write, "I am alone." They write, "I am a failure." With every stroke, the sand shifts, and the desert mirrors these declarations, manifesting the weariness, the solitude, and the defeat back upon the soul that uttered them. The paradox is this. The individual stands in the presence of the most powerful creative command in the universe, yet they use that power to construct a prison. They carry the key to the palace of light in their palm, but they use it to lock the door to their own cells. The air is thick with the scent of ozone and ancient wisdom, waiting for a different decree. The universe is not judging the words. It is merely vibrating in sympathy with them. The bush waits. The ink is drying. The identity is being etched into the fabric of reality, and the world is preparing to bow to the definition you provide. Why has the human species become so adept at utilizing the most profound power in existence for the purpose of self-diminishment? And how can one pivot from the architecture of limitation to the architecture of the infinite? To answer the why, we must look at the psychological architecture of the self-concept. The mind, in its desire for stability, demands a fixed point of reference. It is uncomfortable with the fluid, shimmering nature of the eternal soul. To make sense of the world, the mind takes the I am, that pure, unadulterated state of consciousness, and attempts to dress it in the clothing of past experiences. It anchors the self to a diagnosis, a title, a traumatic event, or a recurring struggle. By saying I am broke, you provide the ego with a reliable, predictable structure. It is a terrifyingly efficient way to avoid the responsibility of being limitless. To admit that you are the eternal I am is to accept that you have no one left to blame for your reality. The how of this deconstruction involves linguistic alchemy. You must observe your own language with the detachment of a scientist watching a chemical reaction. When you utter the words I am, you are not merely describing a state of being. You are performing an act of invocation. You are summoning the subconscious servant and telling it, make this true. If you say I am a slow learner, you are instructing the mind to create neural pathways that confirm that limitation. You are, quite literally, rewiring your own brain to match your proclamation. Recursive thinking reveals that the I am is the base frequency of your existence. It is the blank canvas. When you add a predicate, an adjective, a noun, a history you are painting upon that canvas. Most of us have been painting with mud, using the colors of our insecurities, believing the canvas itself is dark. The deeper truth, the ontological realization, is that the canvas is always white. The I am is always uncontaminated. The feeling of being broken or past one's prime is not an identity. It is a temporary condition, like a cloud passing over the sun. The cloud is not the sun. You are the sun. You are the light that is currently obscured by your own persistent, loud, and incorrect definitions of yourself. To reclaim the name of creation is to strip away the predicates until only the pure, radiant I am remains. Consider the story of Alara, a woman who had lived for 62 years in the shadows of her own choosing. Alara resided in a city that celebrated the young, the loud, and the fast. She worked in a library that was perpetually dusty, and she moved through the aisles with such a tentative, apologetic grace that the patrons often looked right through her, as if she were a ghost haunting the stacks. Alara had spent decades whispering to herself, I am invisible, I am a burden to my children, I am a relic of a time that no one remembers. Her life became a masterclass in disappearance. Her boss forgot her name. Her neighbors ceased to wave. Her own reflection in the library windows seemed to lose its color, fading into the gray stone of the walls. She was the empress of nothingness, a woman who had successfully commanded the universe to overlook her. One evening, while shelving a volume on ancient mythologies, Alara came across a passage that stopped the breath in her chest. The name you give yourself is the name the world must use. She felt a sudden, sharp ache behind her eyes. She realized that she had been the one wielding the eraser, rubbing her own existence out of the portrait of the world. She sat on the cold library floor and decided, with a quiet, steely resolve, to change the decree. She did not start with a lie. She did not claim to be a queen of a distant land. She simply whispered, "I am a manifestation of divine love." The first week was brutal. The silence of her apartment felt louder. The feeling of being overlooked intensified. Her mind, the faithful servant, tried to hold the old structure together, whispering, "You are 62. You are alone. This is nonsense." But Alara refused to engage with the servant. She kept the new decree in her heart, like a glowing coal. She began to stand differently, her shoulders uncurled, her spine lengthened, and she began to look people directly in the eye, not with a question, but with a silent acknowledgement of their shared humanity. By the second month, the world began to fracture and reform. A patron at the library, a woman who had been visiting for years, stopped Alara and asked, "I don't know why I haven't noticed before, but you have such a radiant presence. Would you like to join me for tea?" Within a year, Alara was not just a librarian, she was a mentor, a presence, a force of warmth in the city. She had not aged backward, nor had she become wealthy in gold. She had simply reclaimed the name of creation. She had stopped being the ghost, and the world, in its perfect, obedient response, had no choice but to start seeing the Empress. Alara's transformation was not a miracle, it was a demonstration of the law. You are the Empress or the Emperor of your own reality, but you have been ruling from the dungeon of your own misperceptions. To embody this truth today, you must identify the muddy predicates you have attached to your I am. Take out your parchment. On the first line, write the phrase that has kept you small. I am blank. Now, look at it. Do you see the limitation? Do you see how it is merely a description of the past, not the potential of the future? Now, cross it out. Draw a line through it with the finality of a judge's gavel. Below it, write the truth of your eternal nature. I am blank. Choose something that feels like a stretch, but not a fantasy. Use phrases like, I am a vessel of divine wisdom, or I am a radiant expression of life. Do not worry if your mind revolts. The revolt is just the old architecture falling down to make room for the new. If you have felt the heavy, limiting I am finally shatter within you, hit the like button. Let this be your public declaration that the old identity has been left on the library floor. You have now begun to reclaim the power of the first key. You have seen how the I am acts as the cornerstone of your entire reality. But there is a second key, a key that unlocks the treasury of the universe. If I am is the identity, then I have is the accounting of the soul. Most people are waiting for the world to fill their coffers before they claim they have anything. But the law works in reverse. You must feel the possession of the infinite before it can manifest in the finite. In our next chapter, we descend into the ledger of the soul. We shall learn how to stand on the rungs of evidence, climbing from the absolute zero of the material world to the absolute abundance of the spiritual. The servant is waiting for the next order. Are you ready to see what you truly possess? Imagine a radio station broadcasting from the center of a storm. The equipment is ancient, composed of brass dials and glowing vacuum tubes, hums with a power that transcends the physical apparatus. This station does not broadcast music or news, it broadcasts the core, unvarnished vibration of your soul. Now, envision the listener, the individual caught in the static of their daily existence. They are frantically turning the dials, trying to tune into a station of prosperity, love, or peace, yet all they hear is the screeching feedback of their own underlying doubt. There is a profound, maddening paradox here. The listener believes they are broadcasting hope, faith, or desire, but the airwaves carry only the frequency of need. The universe, a vast, sensitive receiver, does not hear the words they speak, it hears the vibration they hold. You may stand in the middle of a crowded room, shouting your desires to the heavens, yet the heavens remain silent, because you are broadcasting from the frequency of a hole that needs to be filled. The air around you is thick with the crackle of discordance. It is the sensory experience of the weight. You feel it in the pit of your stomach, the gnawing, heavy sensation that what you seek is far away, unreachable, separated from you by a vast, cold expanse of time and effort. The pattern interruption is this. The reality you inhabit is not a reflection of what you want. It is a precise, immutable manifestation of what you are. The static you hear is not an external interference. It is the sound of your own resistance. You are trying to transmit a signal of abundance while your internal instruments are still calibrated to the frequency of lack. Why does the universe respond to our vibration rather than our articulation? And how does one recalibrate an internal frequency that has been set to survival for decades? The why lies in the fundamental nature of the holographic universe. At the subatomic level, there is no separation between the observer and the observed. Everything is a fluctuation of energy, a complex web of resonance. If the I am is the identity, and the I have is the manifestation, then frequency is the bridge that connects the two. The subconscious mind, acting as the ultimate translator, interprets your dominant emotional state as the primary command. If your words say, "I am wealthy," but your emotional frequency is defined by the terror of an empty bank account, the subconscious prioritizes the feeling over the syntax. It is a biological necessity. Feelings are the body's truth, while words are merely intellectual constructs. The how of recalibration is a process of deep somatic honesty. This requires the practice of recursive resonance. You must ask, what am I actually feeling in this moment? When you desire change, you are usually operating from a state of wanting. But wanting is a frequency of separation. It assumes the object of your desire is over there and you are over here. To bridge that gap, you must move into the frequency of possession. This is not a mental trick. It is a physical alignment. Philosophically, this is the shift from temporal expectation to eternal presence. We are taught that time is linear. I will work today, and in the future, I will receive the reward. But the law of resonance operates in the eternal now. You cannot attract what you want. You can only attract what you are. If you want a life of peace, you must find the frequency of peace within your own nervous system before the outer circumstances provide a reason for it. The resistance you feel, the static, is the ego's way of protecting you from the unknown. It fears the silence of the new frequency because the ego can only exist in the noise of the old struggle. To master resonance, you must learn to sit in the silence of the new frequency until the outer world is forced to harmonize with you. In the high mountain kingdom of Vial, there lived a weaver named Silas. Silas was known for his tapestries, which were said to capture the very essence of the viewer's deepest intentions. But Silas had a secret. He was a man of chronic, unrelenting anxiety. He was perpetually worried about the mountain passes closing, about the wool supply failing, and about his own fading reputation. Silas spent his days working at his loom, weaving with a frantic, jerky motion. Because he was broadcasting a frequency of scarcity and fear, his tapestries, while technically perfect, always turned out gray, dull, and brittle. People would look at them and feel a strange, hollow coldness. They would not buy them. Silas would then despair, and his despair would only intensify his fear, creating a downward spiral of resonance. One winter, a traveler arrived at Silas's door, a woman who carried no bags, but whose presence seemed to hum with a steady, golden warmth. She watched Silas weave for 3 days. On the 4th day, she spoke. "Silas, you are trying to weave sunlight with hands that are shaking with the cold of the coming night. You must stop trying to weave the tapestries and begin to weave the silence." Silas did not understand. He tried to argue that his livelihood depended on the work, but the traveler simply placed a hand on his loom and whispered, "The loom does not create the pattern, your hands do, and your hands are currently governed by the storm in your mind." Silas closed his eyes. He stopped the loom. He sat in the center of the cold, drafty room and refused to move. He allowed himself to feel the fear, not to fight it, but to inhabit it. He felt the cold in his bones, the worry in his chest, and he watched them like clouds in the sky. He did this for hours, then days, until the fear became just another sensation, like the sound of the wind. Then, he began to look for a different sensation. The feeling of the heat from the hearth, the feeling of the steady beat of his own heart, the feeling of the threads between his fingers. He anchored his frequency to the presence of the threads rather than the absence of the coin. When he finally began to weave again, he did not rush. He wove with a slow, deliberate peace. When the first tapestry emerged, the entire village went silent. It was not just a tapestry, it was an invitation to stillness. It shimmered with a warmth that seemed to emanate from the fabric itself. Silas had not changed the materials, he had changed the resonance of the weaver. He had stopped broadcasting the storm and started broadcasting the hearth. The outer world responded. The village began to thrive, the supplies arrived, and the mountain passes, for reasons unknown, seemed to stay clear just for him. The story of Silas is the story of your own internal laboratory. You have been attempting to manifest a reality from the frequency of need, and the universe has been obediently providing you with more need. To embody the law of resonance, you must stop trying to change the circumstances and begin to change the frequency of your own nervous system. Begin today by identifying the static in your life. What is the repeating, anxious thought that hums in the background of your day? Do not judge it. Do not attempt to force it away. Simply observe it, as Silas did. Then, choose a new frequency. Ask yourself, what would it feel like if the outcome I desire was already unfolding? Do not search for the thing. Search for the feeling of the thing. Let that feeling settle in your chest. Let it become the background hum of your consciousness. If you are ready to stop weaving the storm and begin weaving the stillness, press like. Let this be your signal that you are taking control of your internal broadcast. You have begun to understand the mechanics of the law of resonance. You have learned that the universe is a mirror, not a judge. You have seen how Silas transformed his world by first transforming his inner state. But there is a vital question that remains. If resonance is the bridge, what is the currency of the spiritual realm? How do we account for the abundance that is already ours? In our next chapter, we descend into the ledger of the soul. We shall uncover the secret of spiritual accounting, learning why the phrase, "I have," is the most powerful tool for unlocking the physical manifestation of your dreams. The static is clearing. Can you hear the melody of the new reality? Subscribe to this series to ensure you are ready to open the ledger. We are nearing the heart of the teaching. And the next key is the one that turns the lock on the physical world. Are you prepared to receive what you already possess? In the grand, silent library of the universe, there exists a ledger that is neither written in ink nor bound by parchment. It is a ledger of pure frequency, a mirror that records the inventory of the soul. The paradox that confronts the seeker is this. The world views possession as a consequence of acquisition one must do to have. The eye looks at the empty bank account, the silent phone, the barren landscape of one's circumstances, and declares, with the cold authority of a witness, "I have nothing." But consider the sensory reality of this moment. Look upon the world not with the eyes of the ego, which is a hungry, grasping entity, but with the eyes of the spirit. The ground beneath your feet does not ask you if you have paid for its support. It holds you with the unwavering certainty of gravity. The breath in your lungs, that rhythmic, invisible tide, does not pause to check if you are deserving before it fills your chest. You stand in a field of infinite potential, surrounded by the invisible architecture of your own life, yet you feel empty. This is the great reversal. You have been trained to look for evidence of your existence in the external, while the internal treasury, the only realm where true possession is anchored, remains dusty, unopened, and ignored. You are like a man dying of thirst in the middle of an ocean, complaining that he has no water to drink. Why is the human mind so pathologically tethered to the belief that having is an external event? And how does the practice of spiritual accounting rewrite the fundamental laws of manifestation? The why is found in the evolutionary trap of the finite. The human ego is designed to navigate a physical realm of limited resources. In the physical, if you hold one apple, you do not hold two. This logic, while vital for survival, is lethal to the spirit. The ego demands physical evidence because it views reality as a closed system. If the evidence is absent, the ego panics, signaling lack, which is the frequency of repulsion. To the subconscious, lack is not a condition, it is a command. It is the instruction to keep the shelves of your life bare. The how of this deconstruction involves recursive ownership. You must ask, if I am a child of the infinite, how can I ever truly lack? The answer is that lack is not a physical reality. It is a perceptual error. Spiritual accounting is the conscious, deliberate act of recognizing that your current reality is not a vacuum, but a state of being that is already full of divine supply. It is the process of identifying the rungs of evidence, the tangible, undeniable facts of your existence that prove you are not a void, but a participant in a living, breathing reality. When you say, I have, you are not describing what is in your wallet, you are describing the state of your spirit. You are aligning yourself with the frequency of possession. By declaring I have a pulse, I have the ability to think, I have a memory of beauty, you are training your nervous system to hunt for supply rather than deficits. This is not positive thinking. Positive thinking is a thin veneer of paint over a crumbling wall. Spiritual accounting is the structural reinforcement of the wall itself. You are moving your identity from the person who needs to the person who possesses. This is the pivot point. When you shift to the frequency of possession, you stop grasping. And in the economy of the universe, those who stop grasping are the only ones capable of receiving. He was a man obsessed with the ledger of his losses. Every morning, he would count his coin, and every morning, he would weep at the absence of what he lacked. I have no influence, he would moan. I have no status. I have no legacy. He walked with his head bowed, his hands clutched tightly in his pockets as if to protect the nothingness he held. One day, a mendicant entered his shop, a man who carried nothing but a wooden staff and a cloak worn thin by the winds of many lands. The mendicant asked to buy a small trinket, but Kalen, in his bitterness, snapped, I have nothing to sell to the likes of you. My shelves are empty, my accounts are dry, and my life is a ledger of holes. The mendicant smiled, a slow, deep movement of the spirit. You are the richest man I have ever met, Kalen, he said. You have a voice that can speak your pain. You have hands that can count your losses. You have a storehouse that has kept you dry for 40 years. You have the memory of your father's face. You have a sky above your roof that offers you the sun every morning. Yet, you choose to treat these as if they are debts you owe the world. Kalen was furious. Those are not assets. They are merely facts of my existence. Facts are the currency of the universe, the mendicant replied. You are hoarding the pennies of the spirit, waiting for the gold of the world to descend. But the gold only flows to those who recognize the currency they already hold. The mendicant walked out, and Kalen, in a fit of restless, stinging pride, decided to prove the man wrong. He took a scrap of paper and began to write. He wrote down everything he had, even the small, stinging truths. I have the breath that irritates my chest. I have the hands that ache from counting. I have the light that shows me the emptiness. As he wrote, he stopped. He looked at the list. He realized he had been using his power to define his lack rather than his ownership. He felt a strange, terrifying warmth in his belly. He stood up, went to his door, and for the first time in years, he did not look at the empty street with fear. He looked at it with the realization that he was standing on his own ground. He began to treat his small, everyday possessions, the chair, the quill, the light, as if they were the seeds of a future forest. He began to say, I have this, and the universe, recognizing the frequency of the owner, began to bring him the rest. The story of Kalen is the story of the empty ledger. You are standing in the middle of a wealth that the world cannot see because you have refused to claim it. To embody this today, you must begin your own spiritual accounting. You must learn to count the rungs of your own ladder, starting from the ones closest to the earth. Take your paper. You are not writing a wish list. You are writing an inventory. Right, I have, and follow it with the most undeniable, physical, and emotional truths you can grasp in this moment. I have the strength to hold this pen. I have the capacity to choose my next thought. I have the memory of a love that was real. I have a life that is currently in motion. Hold each one until you feel the weight of it in your palm. Feel the possession. If you are ready to claim your true inventory and stop acting as if you are a beggar in your own house, hit the like button. This is your first entry in the new ledger. You have now begun the work of spiritual accounting. You have seen how Kalen moved from the merchant of shadows to the merchant of possibility simply by changing what he acknowledged as his. But possession is not the end of the journey. Once you acknowledge what you have, you must decide how to use it. How do you take the inventory of your life and direct it toward a specific destination? In our next chapter, we descend into the sovereignty of the sail. We shall learn the final, most terrifyingly beautiful key, I-Kuz. We will discuss how to move from being the passenger of your own life to the captain of the ship. The ledger is open. Are you ready to see what you are truly capable of steering? Subscribe to this series to ensure you are present when we hoist the sails. The voyage is just beginning, and the destination is the very center of your own power. Are you ready to steer? Imagine a sprawling, opulent garden at the height of autumn. The leaves are a riot of gold, russet, and violent crimson. A breathtaking display of nature's final, grand performance before the slumber of winter. Yet, in the center of this garden, there is a gardener who stands motionless, clutching a pair of silver shears. They are frantically clipping away every fallen, withered leaf, stuffing them into a velvet sack as if they can prevent the cycle of decay. They smile a rigid, brittle smile at every passerby, insisting that the garden is always in full bloom, while their boots sink into the damp, rotting mulch of the very leaves they refuse to acknowledge. This is the sensory landscape of the false bloom, the culture of toxic positivity. It is a masquerade of the soul. We are surrounded by voices that demand we paint over our cracks with gilded light, as if the darkness beneath does not exist. The paradox is biting. By denying the withered leaf, the gardener denies the very soil that feeds the next spring. They are exhausted, not by the work of gardening, but by the work of denial. They carry the weight of 1,000 unacknowledged sorrows, yet they perform a dance of joy that rings hollow in the quiet of the night. This is the pattern interruption. The realization that true spiritual power is not found in the rejection of your pain, but in the radical, uncompromising honesty of your presence. It accepts the decay as the precursor to the growth. Why then do you insist on deceiving your own heart? Why does the modern seeker find such comfort in the performative display of good vibes, and how does this hollow optimism serve as the greatest barrier to actualized manifestation? To explore this, we must engage in recursive deconstruction. We ask, why do we feel the need to mask our suffering? The answer is fear. We fear that if we acknowledge the shadow, we will be consumed by it. We fear that if we admit, I am in pain, the universe will interpret that as a permanent state. Thus, we create a barrier of toxic positivity, a wall of sunshine words, designed to keep our own inner reality at bay. The how of this self-deception is the suppression of the somatic narrative. Every feeling you have is a vibration of energy. When you suppress a negative emotion, you do not destroy it. You simply bury it in the subconscious, where it continues to influence your frequency. Your subconscious mind is not fooled by your grin. It reads the frantic pulse beneath your skin. It recognizes the dissonance between your words, I am blessed, and your internal state, I am terrified. This dissonance is the static we discussed previously. It is the frequency of the lie. The deeper philosophical truth is that the I have principle, the spiritual accounting we established, has no room for denial. Authentic I have is not the absence of problems, it is the presence of perspective. It is the ability to look at a field of charred earth and say, I have the capacity to recognize this fire, and I have the wisdom to see the fertility beneath. Denial says, the fire didn't happen. Sovereignty says, The fire happened, and because I have acknowledged it, I am now free to choose what grows in its place. We must move from the performance of peace to the possession of truth. If you are not honest about where you are standing, you have no foundation from which to step forward. You cannot build a bridge to a destination you refuse to admit you have not yet reached. In the city of Argentis, there lived a painter named Juliana. She was famed for her ability to capture the perfect life in her murals. Every wall she touched became a testament to prosperity, joy, and eternal youth. But Juliana's own studio was a place of frantic, hidden misery. She spent her days weeping into her brushes, terrified that if anyone saw the true state of her heart, the lingering grief of a lost love, the gnawing anxiety of debt, the magic of her murals would dissipate. She began to coat her studio windows in a thick, pearlescent glaze. From the outside, the light within appeared soft, golden, and heavenly. From the inside, however, Juliana could no longer see the sun. She could no longer see the changing seasons. She lived in a perpetual, artificial amber, cut off from the reality of the world. She began to speak to her reflection. I am happy, I am whole, I am abundant, while her body withered in the stagnant air of her own denial. One day, a storm of immense power struck Argentis. The wind howled with the force of 1,000 voices, and a jagged branch from an old oak tree smashed directly through Juliana's glazed window. The glass shattered, showering the floor in diamond-bright shards. The freezing, bracing wind of the storm rushed into the studio. Juliana shrieked and huddled in the corner, waiting for her murals to turn to dust, waiting for the bad energy to destroy her. But as the storm raged, she noticed something. The air in the room, for the first time in years, was clean. The cold wind felt like a baptism. She looked at her murals, and in the harsh, honest light of the storm, she saw them not as perfect, but as incomplete. They were static. They were dead. She saw a smear of charcoal on her own hand, a smudge of real, gritty, honest soot. She realized that the perfect mural had been an insult to the complexity of her own life. She picked up a palette knife and, instead of trying to repair the glass, she walked to her mural. She began to paint over the perfect, smiling faces with the raw, turbulent colors of the storm. She painted the gray of the sky, the brown of the mud, the sharp silver of the rain. She stopped performing the perfect bloom. She started painting the living truth. Her neighbors, passing by the broken window, stopped and stared. They didn't see a mural of perfection, they saw a mirror of their own hearts. They saw a human being who was brave enough to own her winter. And because she was finally honest, she was finally free to paint the spring. The story of Juliana is the blueprint for your own liberation from the performance of happiness. You do not need to be perfect to be powerful. In fact, your power is often locked away in the very wounds you have been hiding behind a mask of forced optimism. To embody this truth, you must embrace radical honesty. Do not fear the bad feelings. They are not enemies, they are messengers. They are the vibration of your human experience. When you feel the weight of a hard day, do not paste a smile over it. Say, I am experiencing the sensation of difficulty, and I acknowledge it. I have the strength to feel this, and I have the sovereignty to release it when it has delivered its message. You are not denying the winter, you are simply refusing to let it be the only season in your heart. If you are ready to shatter the glazed windows of your own performance and walk out into the bracing, honest air of truth, hit the like button. This is your first step toward an authentic life. You have now moved beyond the performative nature of the ego and into the grounded reality of the soul. You have seen how Juliana's willingness to embrace the storm allowed her to create art that finally mattered. But now that you are standing in the truth, what is the next movement? Now that you have acknowledged your current reality, how do you steer the ship? We have arrived at the most critical, active, and sovereign key of all, IQs. In our next chapter, we descend to the deck of the ship. We shall learn how to grip the sail of your life and turn it against the wind of circumstance. The storm has passed, the air is clear, and the helm awaits your hand. Are you prepared to take the wheel? Subscribe to this series to ensure you don't miss the moment we set the course. The Iku's chapter is the moment the victim dies and the captain of your destiny finally takes command. Are you ready to lead? The ocean is a vast, indifferent expanse of cobalt and foam, where the waves rise with a primordial rhythm oblivious to the fragility of the vessels that traverse them. Imagine a lone ship, its timber bleached by the sun, its sails tattered by the relentless pressure of a gale that has raged for weeks. On the deck stands a figure, clutching the wheel with knuckles white as bone, eyes fixed upon the horizon with a gaze of desperate, frantic intensity. This captain believes that if they only steer hard enough, if they only wrestle with the wheel with sufficient fury, they can force the wind to shift, command the waves to calm, and compel the storm to surrender its territory. But here is the paradox that breaks the spirit of the uninitiated. The storm does not care about the captain's struggle. The wind does not recognize the captain's exertion. The harder the captain fights the gale, the more exhausted they become, and the more the ship is tossed at the whim of the tempest. They have mistaken the struggle for the steerage. They have convinced themselves that they are a captive of the weather, a victim of the sea's temper, waiting for the heavens to grant them a moment of reprieve. The pattern interruption is this. You cannot control the wind. You cannot command the sea to still. But you, and only you, possess the singular authority of the sail. The wind is the circumstance. The sail is your choice. The captain who remains in the misery of reaction believes they are trapped by the gale. The sovereign captain, however, understands that the direction of the ship is not determined by the force of the wind, but by the angle of the sail. You have been fighting the wind, wasting your divine energy on the uncontrollable, while the very tool that could carry you to paradise sits unused in your hands. Why has the human spirit been conditioned to live in a state of perpetual reaction? And how does the act of choosing transform the existential experience from a struggle into an adventure? To analyze this, we must engage in recursive deconstruction. We ask, why does the ego prefer the state of reaction? The answer is simple. It is the safest place to hide. To react is to be blameless. If the world is a storm that happens to you, then your failures are not your fault. You are relieved of the terrifying, exhilarating burden of authorship. The ego clings to the identity of the victim because it provides a convenient, prepackaged narrative. I am a good person who is being mistreated by a cruel fate. To shift into the frequency of IQs is to incinerate that narrative. It is to accept that you are the author of every chapter, including the ones written in darkness and despair. The how of this deconstruction is the cultivation of active sovereignty. When we say IQs, we are not claiming we can magically rearrange the physical world in an instant. We are claiming that we are the final arbiter of meaning. When a circumstance arrives, a bill, an insult, a failure, the ego immediately begins to script a response of fear, anger, or shame. That is the conditioned response. It is the default path. To choose is to insert a sacred, intentional pause between the event and the response. It is the practice of noticing the conditioned impulse, observing it, and then saying, I acknowledge the fear, but I choose to respond with peace. This is not a denial of the difficulty. It is the assertion of your authority over the internal narrative. The why behind this power is that the universe is a resonance chamber. When you choose your response, you are effectively setting the frequency for the next moment of your life. If you choose fear, you broadcast fear, and the universe delivers more circumstances to fear. If you choose sovereignty, you broadcast a signal of mastery, and the universe, that ever-obedient servant, must begin to rearrange the world to provide you with further opportunities for mastery. You are not just choosing a mood, you are choosing the next iteration of your reality. In the iron-wrought city of Caldora, there lived a woman named Serafina, who served as the keeper of the city's massive ancient gates. Her life was defined by the arrivals of others. She opened the gates for the merchants, she closed them for the soldiers, and she spent her nights in a tiny stone guardhouse, listening to the echoes of boots on cobblestone. Serafina often told the townspeople, I am trapped by the duty of the gates. I have no choice but to stay, for the city would fall without me. For years, Serafina withered. She felt the gray of the stone seep into her own heart. She watched the merchants come and go, envious of their freedom, while she remained the prisoner of her own responsibility. She believed that her circumstances were the bars of her cage. One evening, an old traveler, a man who walked with the grace of one who had sailed every ocean, stopped at the gate. He didn't ask to enter. He sat on the threshold and watched Serafina as she fussed with the heavy iron chains. "You hold the key to the gate," the traveler remarked, his voice like dry leaves. "Yet you act as if the key holds you." Serafina laughed bitterly. "I have a duty." "It is not a choice. Everything is a choice," the traveler whispered. "You choose to hold the key. You choose to believe that the city requires you to be its prisoner. You are not a guard. You are a captive of your own consent." That night, Serafina sat in her guardhouse and stared at the iron key. She realized the traveler was right. She didn't have to stay because the city needed her. She stayed because she was afraid of what might happen if she wasn't needed. She stayed because she didn't know who she would be if she wasn't Serafina the gatekeeper. She stood up and did something she had never done. She walked to the gate and, instead of looking at it as a barrier, she looked at it as a doorway. She whispered, "I choose to be here tonight. I am not trapped. I am serving this chapter of my life because it provides me the resources to study the horizon." The next day, she didn't leave her post, but her frequency shifted. She was no longer a prisoner. She was an investor in her own time. She began to use the quiet hours to study maps the merchants brought. She began to save the coin she earned. She started choosing her interactions, treating the gate not as her cage, but as her command center, and, as if the universe were watching for the moment her internal declaration reached its peak, a traveler arrived 3 months later, looking for someone who knew the roots of the mountains, someone with the specific, meticulous knowledge that only a gatekeeper possessed. Serafina was offered a role as a navigator for a merchant fleet. She had spent years believing she had no choice, while all the while, she held the key that could have opened the world. Serafina's transformation is the invitation of this chapter. You have been acting as the gatekeeper of your own cage, believing the locks were held by someone else, while the key has been in your palm the entire time. To embody this truth today, you must identify one area of your life where you have declared, "I have no choice." This is your assignment. Locate that feeling of being trapped. It may be your job, your finances, or a relationship. Now, say aloud, "I choose to be here for this season, and I choose to use this season to prepare for the next." Feel the immediate shift in your shoulders. The weight of have to is replaced by the power of choose to. You are no longer enduring. You are investing. You are no longer a leaf in the wind. You are the captain of the sail. If you are ready to reclaim your sovereignty and stop viewing your life as a series of forced labor, hit the like button. This is your decree of independence. You have now moved from the stage of acknowledging your reality, "I have," to the stage of active sovereign command, "I choose." You have seen how Serafina liberated herself by changing her internal narrative from trapped to investing. But even with the sail in your hand, there is the mystery of the timing. How do you ensure that your commands are delivered with maximum impact? When is the best time to speak to the servant? There is a secret known to the mystics and the neuroscientists alike, a liminal space between the waking and the dreaming, where the gatekeeper of the mind goes silent. In our next chapter, we descend into the alchemy of the threshold. We shall learn how to program your subconscious during the sacred minutes before sleep, transforming your very dreams into the blueprints for your waking reality. The sail is hoisted. Are you ready to learn how to catch the wind? Subscribe to this series to ensure you don't miss the secret of the Midnight Decree. We are approaching the final, most powerful tools in our arsenal. Are you ready to speak to the universe while it is at its most receptive? Imagine a mountain peak, jagged and severe, thrusting upward against a relentless, howling winter gale. On this summit stands a solitary cedar, its roots coiled deeply into the frozen, unforgiving granite. The tree has been shaped by the mountain's fury, its branches are bent, its trunk is twisted, and it bears the scars of decades of ice and gale. To the unobservant eye, this tree is a victim of the peak, a broken thing, battered into a grotesque form by forces it could never hope to defy. Yet, watch the tree when the dawn light touches it. There is a majesty in its gnarled architecture that the valley pines, soft and untouched, will never know. It does not rage against the wind. It does not pray for the mountain to flatten. It holds its ground with a silent, ironclad dignity. Here is the profound, unsettling paradox. The most sovereign being in the landscape is the one that has been most permanently altered by the elements. The tree cannot choose the climate, but it chooses its relationship to the climb. We often believe that sovereignty requires the total absence of difficulty, that to be in control means to command a reality free of illness, grief, or historical burden. But true sovereignty is not found in the removal of the mountain. It is found in the way you root yourself upon it. You are currently facing unchangeable facts. The echoes of a past you cannot rewrite, the physical limitations of a body, or the closing of doors that remain locked despite your best efforts. The pattern interruption is this. The suffering you experience is not caused by the mountain, but by your insistence that it be a meadow. Sovereignty is the transition from fighting the terrain to mastering the posture of the climber. Why does the ego perceive acceptance as a form of surrender? And how can one wield choice in the face of circumstances that defy our direct influence? To solve this, we must engage in recursive deconstruction. We ask, why does the ego equate resistance with power? Because resistance feels active, and the ego fears the silence of passivity. We believe that if we are not fighting our problems, we are weak. This is a fatal misconception. Resistance is not power, it is an energetic deadlock. When you fight the unchangeable, you are essentially pouring your life force into a drain. You are burning your internal fuel to keep a flame lit in a vacuum. The how of this sovereignty is the mastery of relational intelligence. You must realize that while you cannot alter the outer circumstance, you have absolute dominion over your inner posture toward it. This is not semantic games, it is an energetic shift. When you change your relationship to a problem, you change your frequency, and when you change your frequency, the problem itself or your experience of it must fundamentally shift. The philosophy here is sovereign grace. Grace is the ability to move through the unavoidable with your integrity intact. It is the realization that your soul is not defined by the obstacles you face, but by the posture you adopt in their shadow. If you are diagnosed with a condition, the condition is the mountain. The sovereignty is not the claim that the condition is gone. It is the choice to treat your body with profound tenderness, to align your internal environment with healing, and to refuse to let the label become your identity. You are using the I am, the identity, the I have, the resources, and the I choose, the response, to build a sanctuary on the summit. By doing so, you stop being a victim of the terrain and become a witness to your own resilience. You have reclaimed your authority, not by forcing the world to be different, but by proving that nothing in the world can force you to be small. In the iron-wrought city of Keldor, there lived a master clockmaker named Elian. Elian was known throughout the realm for his ability to craft timepieces of such precision that they would not lose a second for a century. But in his 55th year, Elian suffered a tremor of the hands, a chronic, degenerative shaking that made the fine, delicate work of his trade impossible. The city whispered in pity. They watched the master clockmaker walk the streets, his hands twitching in the pockets of his coat. Elian's first response was the response of the ego. He raged, he drank, he cursed the heavens. He spent his nights trying to hold his hands still with sheer willpower, only to watch them dance with more violent intent. He was a man defined by his precision, and without it, he felt he was nothing. He was a victim of his biology. One night, exhausted by the war with his own nerves, Elian sat at his workbench. He looked at a clock that had stopped ticking a grand, complex piece he had built years ago. He realized he could not hold the spring. He could not place the gear, but he could listen. He could still hear the friction in the mainspring. He could still identify the sound of a gear that was slightly out of alignment. He didn't try to fix the clock with his hands. He began to dictate. He hired a young apprentice, a boy with steady hands, but no ear for the music of mechanics. Elian became the architect, the strategist, the mind that directed the labor. He stopped trying to be the hands and chose to be the conductor. As he worked, his tremor remained, but his relationship to it changed. He no longer saw the tremor as an enemy to be destroyed. He saw it as a reminder of the physical cost of his craft. He chose to treat his hands with the respect of a warrior who has survived a great battle. He began to produce clocks that were more intricate, more soulful, and more profoundly beautiful than anything he had made in his youth. Because they were built from his wisdom, not just his motor skill. Elian had faced an unchangeable reality, but by choosing his internal posture, he had transformed his limitation into the very foundation of his greatest work. He was no longer a clockmaker defined by his hands, he was a master defined by his spirit. The story of Elian is the ultimate masterclass in sovereign grace. He did not change the unchangeable, the tremor remained, but he changed everything by changing his posture toward it. He reclaimed his role as the architect of his life, even when the tools in his hands were broken. To embody this today, you must examine the mountain in your own life, the circumstance that currently feels like it is defining you. Ask yourself, if I cannot remove this mountain, what sanctuary can I build upon it? Do not try to solve the unchangeable with force. Use the 3 keys. Say, I am your core spirit, untouched by this mountain. I have the wisdom gained from this very struggle. I choose to treat myself with the kindness of a master who is conducting his masterpiece, regardless of the tools at hand. Watch how the weight shifts. Watch how the mountain, which once felt like a cage, suddenly feels like the height from which you can finally see the horizon. If you are ready to stop fighting the terrain and begin building your sanctuary upon the peak, hit the like button. This is your commitment to the path of the sovereign. You have now learned the hardest lesson of the journey: how to be powerful in the face of that which you cannot move. You have seen how Elian transformed a tragedy into a deeper expression of his genius. But even the master clockmaker needs a way to store his work. How do we ensure that the sovereignty we cultivate during the day is not eroded by the subconscious turmoil of the night? We are approaching the final secret, the alchemy of the threshold. We are about to enter the 1-0-minute window of the night, where the gatekeeper falls silent and your commands go straight to the architect of your reality. In our next chapter, we shall learn how to dream your life into existence. The mountain is beneath your feet and the sky is opening. Are you ready for the final ascent? Subscribe to this series to ensure you do not miss the final, most sacred teaching. The threshold is waiting, and the instructions for the night are the final piece of the puzzle. Are you ready to command your dreams? The sun has long retreated beneath the horizon, leaving the world in a state of soft, blue-gray suspension. In this twilight hour, the familiar landmarks of the daytime world, the desk, the books, the responsibilities begin to dissolve, losing their rigid, objective reality. As the body settles into the rhythmic, downward pull of sleep, the mind enters a state of liminal grace, the threshold. This is the sensory experience of the hypnagogic drift, where the internal monologue loses its coherence and the external world fades to a distant murmur. It is here, in the fragile 10 minutes before the ego surrenders its guard, that the most potent creative power in the universe resides. Yet, consider the tragedy of the modern individual's nightly ritual. As they lie in the darkness, they do not drift into the creative void. They bring their baggage with them. They replay the day's failures like a looped, flickering film. They rehearse the anxieties of tomorrow with a meticulous, agonizing focus. They populate their threshold with the phantoms of regret and the monsters of what if. They are essentially standing in the sacred open doorway of the subconscious, holding a match to the curtains. They are programming their own nightmares, not out of malice, but out of a profound, unconscious ignorance. The paradox is this: the very state that was designed to be the grand workshop of your life, The state where you are most suggestible, most open, and most divinely connected is the state you use to reinforce your limitations. You are turning the key to the treasure vault only to fill it with dust and cold ash. The threshold is open, the servant is waiting for a directive, and you are currently whispering, "Remind me why I am unworthy." Why has humanity ignored the profound, transformative potential of these liminal states? And how does one harness the neurobiology of the threshold to fundamentally alter the trajectory of their reality? To answer the why, we must look at the gatekeeper of the mind. This is the critical faculty, the skeptical, rational filter that defends the ego from change. During the day, the gatekeeper is alert, scanning the environment for threats and reinforcing the boundaries of your current identity. It is the part of you that says, "That is unrealistic," or "You don't deserve that," or "Be practical." In the state of wakefulness, the gatekeeper is the wall that prevents new "I am" declarations from reaching the subconscious. But as you drift toward sleep, the gatekeeper grows tired. It sets down its clipboard. It retreats from the entrance. The threshold is the only time in your 24-hour cycle when the subconscious is unshielded. The how of this alchemy is the practice of intentional imprinting. We engage in recursive thinking to understand this. If the subconscious is the engine of your life, why are you feeding it the fuel of fear at the very moment it is most receptive? You must ask, if I were the conscious designer of my own evolution, would I choose to spend the final minutes of my day in a state of high cortisol stress? The answer is self-evident. Philosophically, the threshold is where the I am meets the I have. It is the moment where you take the declarations you have cultivated during the day and drop them into the deep, fertile dark of your inner world. By speaking your desires in the threshold state, you are bypassing the rational mind and handing the blueprints directly to the architect. You are not thinking these thoughts. You are embodying them in the twilight. You are using the neurochemical shift of the brain, the transition from beta to alpha, and finally to theta brainwaves, to lock your new identity into the very marrow of your nervous system. You are no longer trying to change your life through the blunt, ineffective force of willpower. You are changing your life through the elegant, irresistible grace of subconscious resonance. In the high-walled city of Oran, there lived a sculptor named Kalin who had lost his ability to create. His hands remained steady, but his imagination had become a desert. He could carve the stone, but he could no longer see the form within it. Every night, Kalin would lie awake, recounting his lack of inspiration, feeling the pressure of his empty studio, and wondering if his best work was truly behind him. He was drowning in his own frustration, and the frustration was the final thought he carried into his sleep every single night. An elderly woman, a weaver known to the neighborhood, saw his distress. She told him, "Kalin, you are a gardener who only waters the weeds of your doubt at the hour when the seeds of the night are meant to be planted. You are the architect of your own silence." She taught him the threshold practice. She told him that the 10 minutes before sleep were not for reflection, not for worry, and not for planning. They were for the planting. That night, Kalin followed her advice. He sat on his bed and, as the heavy, sweet pull of sleep began to settle over him, he stopped the thoughts of his empty studio. He began to whisper, not with effort, but with the soft, gentle surrender of a man letting go of a heavy weight. "I am a vessel of divine inspiration. I have access to the infinite forms waiting within the stone. I choose to see the masterpiece in the dark." He didn't force the images. He let the words drift into the fog of his mind. He did this for 3 nights. On the 4th, his sleep changed. He didn't just dream of stone, he dreamed of light. He felt the cold, hard reality of the marble in his fingers, and he felt the intent of the form moving beneath his touch. He woke up with the feeling of the work already done. He went to his studio, and he didn't need to struggle. He picked up his chisel, and the stone seemed to offer itself to him. He was not carving, he was revealing what the night gardener had planted in the dark. He had discovered that the most important work of the sculptor did not happen at the workbench. It happened at the threshold, where the waking world ends and the creation begins. the story of Kaylin, is the key to your own magnum opus. You have been treating the night as a place to dump your waste, when it is, in truth, the factory where your life is built. To embody this truth today, you must treat your threshold as a sacred appointment. As you lie down tonight, do not rehash the day. Do not solve the problems of tomorrow. Let your body grow heavy. Let your breath slow. And in that twilight, speak your 3 keys. I am, I have, I choose. Speak them not as a recitation, but as a lullaby for your own soul. Feel the relief of the words. Feel the peace of the, it is done. This is the alchemy. You are planting the seeds of your tomorrow in the soil of your subconscious, and because you are planting them in the threshold, they will grow with the force of destiny. If you are ready to stop programming your own limitations and start planting the seeds of your masterpiece tonight, hit the like button. This is your commitment to the night gardener within. You have now learned the final, hidden mechanic of the universe. You have learned how to use the threshold of your own consciousness to ensure that your commands are delivered to the servant in the silence of the night. But now, we must bring it all together. The journey is nearing its completion. We have identified the master, the servant, the keys, and the alchemy. But what is the final step? How do you take this work, which can feel so personal and so internal, and make it the indelible, permanent state of your everyday life? We are approaching the final, crowning chapter, the sacred contract. We shall create a physical, tangible anchor for your spiritual truth, ensuring that no matter how loud the world gets, you never lose your connection to the voice that chooses. The threshold is open. The seeds are planted. Are you ready for the final, permanent shift? Subscribe to this series to ensure you don't miss the final ceremony. We are going to write the contract that will anchor your sovereignty forever. Are you ready to sign your own name into the record of the eternal? The dawn does not announce itself with the roar of a cannon, but with the subtle, persistent erosion of the dark. It begins as a faint, bruised violet at the edge of the world, a whisper of promise that eventually bleeds into the defiant gold of a new morning. Consider the state of the individual who has traversed these 10 chapters, the one who stood in the sanctuary of remembering, learned the language of the servant, reclaimed the name of creation, and mastered the alchemy of the threshold. They stand now at the precipice of their own ordinary Tuesday. The paradox that meets them is this. The world appears identical to the one they left behind. The coffee still steams in the same mug, the emails still pile up, the familiar frustrations of the commute and the conversation still hum in the background. Yet, the observer is no longer the same. The observer is a ghost who has suddenly found their body. They are the captain who has finally taken the wheel. They are the architect who has recognized that they were never the builder, but the one who drew the plans. Herein lies the final challenge. The transition from the sanctuary of understanding to the arena of application. How does one maintain the sacred resonance of the spirit when the world screams for the return of the old fragmented self? It is a test of spiritual friction. The world will try to pull you back into the comfortable, reactive habits of your past. It will offer you the old bait, the old anxieties, the old arguments, the old excuses for why you cannot be the one you have declared yourself to be. The pattern interruption is the realization that the world's persistence is not a failure of your work. It is the friction of reality aligning to your new frequency. You are not waiting for the sun to rise. You are the one who has decided to walk into it. Why does the final integration of these spiritual truths feel like a battle against one's own gravity? And how does the act of the sacred contract anchor the shift in a way that prevents the inevitable slide back into mediocrity? To deconstruct this, we engage in recursive integration. We ask, why does the ego demand a physical anchor for a spiritual truth? Because the ego operates in the realm of form. It understands the weight of a pen, the texture of parchment, and the commitment of a signature. To rely solely on the feeling of an epiphany is to risk losing it to the entropy of daily life. The sacred contract is the bridge between the invisible frequency and the visible outcome. It is the ritual of physicalization, the act of taking the ethereal I am, I have, I choose, and binding it to the laws of time and space. The how of this integration is the practice of temporal anchor. You must understand that your subconscious is a machine of habits, and habits are forged in the fire of consistent action. The sacred contract is your commitment to that consistency. When you write your 3 keys on paper, you are performing an act of magical record-keeping. You are effectively informing the servant. This is not a fleeting thought. This is the law of the house. The deeper philosophical inquiry is the law of the seed. Most people fail because they plant the seed of a new identity and then dig it up the next morning to check if it has sprouted. This is the death of potential. The sacred contract demands the discipline of the invisible weight, the absolute, unshakable trust that once the order is placed, the servant is already at work. The integration is not in the seeing of the results, it is in the staying in the frequency of the result. You must act as if the contract is already signed by the universe, even when the outer world has yet to print the confirmation. This is the ultimate sovereignty, to live in the reality of your choice, even when the physical world is still catching up. In the age of the great drought, when the rivers of Keldor had long since turned to dust, there lived a scribe named Malachi. Malachi was not a man of great influence. He was a keeper of records for a city that had forgotten why it existed. For years, the people of Keldor had prayed for rain, but the heavens remained brass. They blamed the drought on the gods, on the climate, on the corruption of their neighbors. They were a city of reactive beggars. Malachi, however, was a man who had studied the laws of the Spirit. He knew that the drought was not a punishment, it was a reflection of the collective frequency of lack that the city had been broadcasting for a century. One day, Malachi took a sheet of hammered gold, a rare and precious thing, and he sat in the center of the town square. He did not ask the people for gold. He did not ask the clouds for rain. He took his stylus and, with the focus of a man signing his own death warrant, he wrote the sacred contract of Keldor. I am the breath of the mountain, and I am the water that feeds the valley. I have the wisdom to hold the vision, and I have the capacity to receive the flood. I choose to be the vessel through which the desert becomes the garden. He signed it, and he placed it in the center of the dry fountain. The townspeople mocked him. A piece of gold will not bring a drop of water, they cried. Malachi did not answer. He went back to his home, and he began to live as if the rain were already falling. He moved his furniture to the center of the room to catch the leaks. He began to plant seeds in the dust. He did not look at the sky. He looked at his hands, which were already preparing for the harvest. He had signed the contract with his life. He was the anchor. He held the frequency of abundance in the heart of a city of lack. For 6 weeks, the mockery continued, and for 6 weeks, the sun beat down with relentless fire. But on the morning of the 42nd day, the wind shifted. It didn't come from the desert, it came from the sea. The clouds gathered, not as a miracle, but as a response. The rain fell, not just in a shower, but in a deluge that filled the empty fountain until the gold sheet shimmered beneath the rising water. Malachi had not forced the rain. He had forced the city to align with the truth he had already signed. The story of Malachi is the ultimate testament to the sacred contract. You are the scribe of your own life, and the universe is waiting for the document to be signed. To embody this today, you must perform your own ceremony. Take a fresh piece of paper. This is not a list of chores. This is your testament. At the top, write the date of your beginning. Write your 3 keys, I am, I have, I choose, and complete them with the declarations that have been burning in your heart throughout this journey. Do not leave a single space for doubt. Sign your name at the bottom with the weight of your entire soul behind it. Place this contract somewhere you will see it every single day, on the mirror, by your kettle, in the pages of the book you read. Let it be the physical anchor that holds you in the storm. If you are ready to sign your contract and accept the full authority of the architect, hit the like button. This is your mark in the stone of your own history. You have completed the journey of the 10 chapters. You have moved from the weight of the world to the mastery of the threshold. You have become the scribe, the captain, and the gardener of your own reality. But remember, the the journey does not end with the signing of the contract. It begins there. You are walking into the sun. The old story has been folded away, and the new one is currently being written by the vibration of your feet upon the earth. Go forth, beloved. The servant is listening. The law is active, and the life you have defined is already rising to meet you. The contract is signed. The rain is coming. Go in power. Subscribe to this series to ensure you remain part of this collective resonance. We will continue to build, to refine, and to grow. The journey never truly ends, it only ascends. Are you ready for the next level of your own evolution?